Now, I want to transition from this. We're going to stay in the UK, and we're going to do one of our regular, we call them First Amendment appreciation segments, because we actually are ardent defenders of free speech on this show, and take it very seriously, in fact, in terms of reality. And some people go like, but no, you said the college students to have a right to protest, so you're opposed to free speech. Well, actually, no. I support the speaker's right to free speech as well as the response right to free speech. That's called free speech.
And there are laws against assault, and there's also civil disobedience.
Indeed. And there's no legal mandate that you speak in a non-interrupted, non-challenged way. People can debate you. Obviously, I've criticized a lot of campus tactics that I think are counterproductive, but I certainly think that if Charles Murray shows up to your campus, he should either be ignored, or if you're going to show up, you should challenge him. And if Ben Shapiro shows up, you should read excerpts of one of his novels or ask him about the puberty process.
Oh, man.
So that being said, let's go to a guy named Maajid Nawaz for our First Amendment Appreciation Day. Now, Maajid Nawaz was somebody that several years ago people would tell me, like, you really should take a look at him because he's got a really valid perspective, and he's not an ex-Muslim, and he's a Muslim, but he collaborates with Sam Harris, and blah, blah, blah. Now, my impression of Maajid Nawaz was always that he basically was just like a sort of wafer-thin, very basic thinker who had an interesting brand niche because he was essentially doing an Einhershi Ali while still claiming a Muslim identity and collaborating with Sam Harris. And I also, again, I'm sorry, I know people really don't like when I do this, but I am familiar with people who actually do work in the Middle East and Pakistan, and even serious academics here who are quite involved in the struggles against religious fanaticism, right-wing politics, monarchies in the Middle East, as well as abuses in a place like Pakistan that are involved. You know, Asma Jahangir was a great hero who died recently, in fact, in Pakistan. Great human rights advocate and advocate in Pakistan. So I didn't think that this sort of, pundit who did talking tours with Sam Harris had anything terribly interesting or distinct to say. And then also he freaked out at me once because I think I indirectly criticized him in a clip or something. I don't recall. The Southern Poverty Law Center, I think, made a mistake by putting him on their hate list or something. I forget what exactly they did. And then I think they really overcorrected that mistake by apologizing and giving him a ton of money. Sort of the quintessential liberal polls of mistakes there.
It's some free speech, not quite free speech.
Yeah, but that would kind of be the point.
Exacting a cost for speech.
Yeah, it seems to me that you could certainly and rightly challenge the hell out of them for doing that, as you should. And in fact, I'd support you because even though I have no respect for Maajid Nawaz's work, I would never put him in that category, and it was inappropriate of them to do so. But I do think, and especially on top of, isn't Jordan Peterson, isn't he putting a lawsuit forward?
Yeah, him and Lindsay Shepard are suing the Canadian university.
I just find it very interesting that it would seem to me that if you were a true ardent free speech advocate, you would, first of all, you would not want to operate in the British system. You'd want to operate in the American system, and you would save any type of action like that for a just absolute pure, it's something that is so beyond the pale that it is not even arguable in a public forum. The Peterson and Shepard case is crazy and hypocritical. Maajid actually had a better case to make of being put on a hate list, but still, I would say not exactly in keeping with a liberal ethos.
If I was a truth teller, that maybe my focus, and I truly believe this was true, that, say, Islam was pathologically murderous, or there's a racial IQ gap, I would probably expect some heat just given what's happened historically. And I'd be like, look, guys, I understand your concerns about these things, but I have to follow the truth. And instead, you just get whiny bitchiness.
You get whiny bitchiness. You come like, I'm just going to follow the suit. Oh, my God, how could you call me a racist? How could you call me this? Well, I don't know, because you're in racist and bigoted traditions. That's why people call you it. So that's pretty obvious. But this to me just really lays bare, and I don't think, I get these kind of dumb sort of like, yeah, what about Maajid or whatever. I'm sorry, I know I'm mispronouncing his name. I apologize. Which, by the way, is interesting. This will be probably the only time that people in this cohort ever acknowledge that racism exists, when somebody who's critiquing them can't pronounce a name correctly. So
say something about Ayaan Hirsi Ali on Twitter.
So I do apologize, but I'm also going to reserve a little bit more words like racism for things like promoting scientific racism than not being a master of name pronunciation. You pedant, annoying, mediocre pricks. And here is him on Sky News, Nawaz, really just in the full circle completion that so many of these people go through, to the kind of contrarian bullshit, to the dark web nonsense. And here we are, concerned troll, indirect Trump apology tour.
I do worry sometimes, and I protested the whole travel ban because he called it a Muslim ban, and I was outraged. I do worry sometimes that we are
upheld, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and I've been speaking against it. But I do worry sometimes that we are also in danger of not giving credit where credit is due. Now, on the subject of North Korea, on the subject of bombing ISIS when it was needed with 0 casualties inflicted, but especially on the subject of the economy. Did you know, for example, and I'm rather impressed by this,
I know exactly
African-American unemployment is at lowest since 1970 what?
But why?
Okay,
Because I don't think that's his legacy.
All
I think
these
that's the legacy of the previous administration.
We're
Most
going to
economists
take
say that
to the
he can't take
streets.
credit for that.
Why weren't those?
Right. So basically, like, what he's doing here, incidentally, a couple of weeks after, nodding along to Sam Harris's ahistorical, continued, and now, of course, whiny bitch, personally aggrieved defense of the bell curve, he is going off on the only talking point Trump has that isn't, in fact, overtly or covertly racist when he talks about African Americans, which is this employment gap. Now we basically see that it follows a lot of patterns that you might expect. It actually spiked in the 80s, where there was another actually war on the social safety net and on austerity, and particularly racialized attack on African Americans under Reagan. It started to dip in the 90s. It reached a very low point in 2000, which made sense because even though it wasn't built in a durable way, there was an economic boom under Bill Clinton. And then it I think it might, reflected the dynamics of Bush. It tipped up. And then, wow, yeah, it really spiked around 2009 and 2010. I wonder what happened at that point. I wonder what major economic event, which, of course, I know it's very petty to introduce things like the 2008 economic meltdown into a conversation about ideas, right, guys? Sorry to be so grubby as to mention, like, actual reality in a conversation with anybody.
Gosh, you want to bring up the past all the time.
Yeah, right. Wait, you're talking about actual things that happened? You're such a SJW should be the intellectual dark web main talking point. So then it spiked up, and then it actually starts precipitously falling under the last several years of the Obama administration. And now it's continuing as every other trend, by the way, which started under Obama, and the recovery has continued under Trump. Now, stipulate, we can dig into these numbers and critique them and get at real unemployment rates, structural inequality, the fact that the gains from the recovery have gone over 90% to the top 1%, the fact that corporations are holding cash reserves, the real critiques that we need to deal with. But on the level of a basic shitbird trying to spin for Trump on Sky News, that graph should do the trick. And I would like to thank everybody for participating in this First Amendment segment.
Yeah,
thank you.
Any charitableness I had toward Maajid is completely gone after he makes that case, because that is, like, basically, if you know anything about economics, you know that trend has been continuing, and basically this is Trump taking credit for not reversing it.
Right. I haven't completely destroyed what was already happening, as I have on so many other areas. And by the way, even that idiotic spin right there of, I don't know what his position on the ban is, but if his position was that he would support what it became, which is, we're going to say it's not a Muslim ban, but we're banning people from certain countries. I don't know what his position is, but he didn't say, in that clip at least, I oppose a ban full slap. He said I opposed it. I was outraged because it was called a Muslim ban. I don't know what that means. If you ban people from Somalia or Yemen, but you don't call it a Muslim ban, are you cool with that? I would like further clarification.
One thing we know he's not cool with is the thing about not giving credit. The worry that you don't give credit where credit is due. Well, I'm sorry. Like, if they're fascists, I don't really give a shit if I'm not giving them proper credit. And that goes for the black unemployment rate. Because I think, frankly, like, he should be more concerned about giving credit where it's not due.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all just... There was a great piece in the New York Review of Books recently about Maajid and Ayaan Ali and how they exist in this whole ecosystem of, you know, essentially people promoting all sorts of destructive ideas to essentially minority communities and the games they play around that and the sort of weaving in and out of identity depending on the context. And yes, you do see it with their follow. It tweets from people who will bend like, you calling the Supreme Court validating the Muslim ban as white supremacist, hysteria much? You don't agree with everything Anhar Ali has ever said about Islam? You are a sexist racist. Well, Sam Harris is just being honest about the stats. Black people are like fucking animals, and they just need to have an honest conversation. You didn't accept uncritically everything that Maajid Nawaz said about Islam? You are a bigot. What I love about these people is that when they're not defending racism and bigoted ideas with horrific intellectual and policy histories, they're actually enacting the most literally essentialist SJW bullshit, which is you cannot disagree with somebody because of their identity, which is actually the most condescending, essentialist, non-human, ridiculous caricature, which I disagree with categorically from anybody who states that position anywhere where they are in politics. I just happen to see it all the time for people on the right who want their ambassadors to be used as a cudgel to avoid any conversation or analysis. It's fucking disgusting.
Well, they think they're beating us at our own game when they do that.
That's not my game.
Like,
I don't play that shit.
Yeah, but they think that it is because they collapse together,
Right.
liberals and leftists, and
Right.
you know the SJW
That's
left
right.
with the actual left, and they always do it with a bit of a smirk. So yeah, it's.
I
shitty.
respond with also a bit of a smirk.
I actually got in trouble with the Quillette, which is a eugenicist publicizing organization out of Australia that sometimes defends IDW guys.
Right.
And I said Ayaan Ali's credibility comes from identity politics,
which is objectively
true. And
Right.
actually, like, I think her lived experience is the one thing about her that makes her interesting.
The one thing not to critique about Ayaan Ali is her personal biography, personal courage, and life trauma. The most important, credible part about her. Mm-hmm. Not her right-wing shilling and mediocre analysis of politics and fear-mongering.
What was the shooter in, like, Norway?
Yes.
Breivik. She's like, Breivik had run out of options because of a politically correct society didn't afford him any, like, opportunities to, react against the Islamic hordes, basically.
That's what Bill Cosby should have said. I ran out of options because girls wouldn't let me knock them out because of political correctness.